seeing delinquency get sticky. So, around April of last year, we saw so we had seen in December of 22, actually, delinquencies start going up, but they got cured in the tax and bonus season. And in reality, I think people, some hope came after the banks were rescued and things kind of continued on this year. They have not been able to catch up. And so we know that FHA has been struggling, over 11% delinquency there. But what you're seeing in Fannie and Freddie as well as they're starting, especially, and this is what I find interesting, a lot of the lower balance loans that are actually struggling. And I think that's why delinquency looks so good when you kind of look at Black Knight's numbers, for instance, because the higher balances are the ones that are doing just fine. And so these lower balance delinquencies kind of get hidden. And so, what I would love to see is them look at it actually by count as opposed to these weighted averages. So we're starting to see it get sticky. Unfortunately, I'm starting to see hardship letters that remind me very much of the last cycle. We're also seeing people no longer not contacting their servicers. So when you look at the HUD loan performance report, you can see the reasons for delinquency, the ones that are ticking up unemployment way more than what we would see by the official unemployment numbers. Also, no contact. And so this is something we definitely saw in the last cycle. And I know this is hard for people to believe, but in reality, when borrowers, so there's two things that could happen. One, they feel ashamed, very ashamed. And so they don't want to call into the servicer. And then the other is they don't care and they're an investor. And so we are seeing an increase in no contact, what's called as no right party contact. They won't call in, so the things have changed. People got way more knowledgeable last time about how to kind of deal with default. And they're going to be strategic about it this time as well for those that actually do want to remain in the home. But that reason for default, no contact is going up. So default's getting sticky. I think, we're also hearing every single day, there's a new tweet out there, new article about property taxes and insurance. And then you've got this condo issue in Florida with the assessments. That's right around the corner. And everybody I've talked to doesn't think DeSantis is going to extend that. And so you have got seniors in serious trouble down in Florida. So, we're in the thick of it. And I think by June of next year, not a single person's going to be talking about low delinquency anymore. But change in COVID, sorry to start laughing, but because this is how radically different loss mitigation is since COVID. What they changed, you didn't even have to contact the servicer. They put you on forbearance. If you weren't paying, they just put you on forbearance without any contact, no conversation. And in fact, now they send out the mods without, you don't have to contact them. They're just going to send the mod out in the mail. And it's a letter that says, hey, you've been approved for a modification. If you make these 3 trial payments, that will tell us that you have agreed to this, but and then we'll send out the formal modification docs and you can sign them. There's no re-underwriting. I mean, you put it through a calculation, but it's not like what we did back during the GFC where we completely re-underwrote the loan. We got financials. We did all kinds of, has your circumstances changed? They didn't even care. They don't care. They're just sending the mods out in the mail now. And so, this is also increasing moral hazard, as we know. So it's just, this game has radically changed. And something I want to mention real quick is another reason we think delinquency is so low is because of the reporting out there. It doesn't show the whole picture. You've got the Fed who talks about the commercial banks. Well, we know 70% of origination is at the non-banks. Well, you've got Black Knight that has 80% of all servicing, but they're missing some of the big specialty servicers. You take someone like FCI Lender Services, they have a 35% delinquency rate, okay, because they're doing non-qualified mortgages as well as private notes. But, someone like ComputerShare has about a 7%. They do specialty servicing, but also government. So the numbers we're seeing out there are not the true story. In my client books in January, we went from very low bankruptcies for borrowers. It increased 200%. And so, it is happening. The foreclosures are not happening because, as we know, the agencies do those non-performing loan sales. They tell whoever buys it, you cannot foreclose for sometimes, 2 to 5 years sometimes, or some of those deals. And typically what they're going to do is go in there and offer, these private investors or nonprofits backed by private investors are going to go in and offer cash for keys or something to get that borrower out so they can turn that house over. Additionally, those private notes, I believe that what we may have witnessed around inventory is more a story about NAR becoming less relevant. The MLS is becoming less relevant because of social media. I think that industry is way bigger than anybody realizes. And this is also another reason they use very small private servicers. This is also another reason we don't know the true delinquency. And when I say NAR, I'm really thinking of the lobbying group, but I'm just thinking, when you look at those historical, I finally got my hands on the existing home data. NAR, Realtor.com, they basically had pulled all that off the Fred site. You couldn't get historical information because for folks that don't know, if you look for Fred, listings for inventory on the Fred site, that is supplied by Realtor.com. And so they took all that off. I finally got it and I started looking at it. And this inventory story just doesn't make sense. And I, based on everything I've seen with my own eyes, based on, going into existing neighborhoods and seeing things that have been flipped, but the lights aren't on because either they can't do those final repairs or they can't, rent it out, whatever. So I believe that maybe what really happened is people just stopped using the MLS the way that they had historically. And you saw more and more of transactions going outside of that system through these private note, actors, because you can talk to people that on social media, just last somebody was talking about getting like hundreds of phone calls because they were trying to sell a rental. And some of these sub 2 guys were wanting to assume the mortgage, even though it wasn't assumable. And so, I just think that we have underestimated the power of social media and we heard about it. We heard about Facebook groups where they'd take a private builder. So in the short-term rental market, they get a private builder to build a home. They put it on Facebook and in 2 hours it was gone. That never made it to the MLS. And so I think that when all this shakes out, we may actually realize that inventory was just, hey, guess what? We have reduced how much we use the MLS. I have nightmares about this, but essentially what will happen, let's say you got behind on your mortgage. They have, in many states, you have to file a notice of default. There's many ways people can find out if you're behind. And there's whole programs that actually they sell to these investors licenses. They can look for these notice of default and they sell you your phone number and address at the same time. And so that's exactly right. They send out postcards, they send out letters, they knock on doors. And they'll say, hey, we know you're behind. We've got a deal for you. We'll take over your mortgage. We're gonna take it to a servicer, and it's all legit. We're gonna take over your mortgage. We're gonna pay your payments, and we're looking for a buyer. Typically, sometimes they already have the cash, but the promise is we're gonna make you whole. Like we're gonna find an investor to kind of buy this home, and so then they start making the payments. The problem is that seller, that borrower is still obligated under the note. And guys, deeds don't mean anything. I'm so sorry to tell you, but in this country, legal standing, this is what they figured out. Whether people can disagree whether it's in the law or not, but legal standing is that it's the possession of that promissory note. And if whoever has possession of that note, that physical note, they will be able to take your house any day of the week. And so, those little deeds don't mean anything when it's time, to really call in that note. Everybody can remember the robo-signing crisis and how all the big banks, including my company, GMAC, got in trouble. We signed the consent order with the Federal Reserve. We also had to sign to the AG settlement, or Attorney General DOJ settlement. And as part of that, they came up with these metrics. And the 1A1 was legal standing. And what is legal standing to pursue default? Because, you had MERS, the Mortgage Electronic Registration System, all this which everybody can argue that's illegal, sure. But what is in case law, what will happen is that whoever shows up at court holding that note, that is who has the legal standing to take possession of that home. And it's not even, I don't, the due on sale. I know these servicers, you probably get one actor out there that thinks, okay, I'm going to go do this. But everybody, that is probably going to be rare. They're just not built to act that way. And quite frankly, I don't think anyone wants them to do that either. Like, the vested interest. I mean, I think so many of these deeds, so you take someone like Redfin, or you take, Case-Shiller, CoreLogic, they're looking at public record and they're taking information off these deeds. And I think what has happened is a lot of these private transactions, just like what you're describing, this is a reason the prices are so inflated, because they're going for people that are desperate. And so they're going to keep that inflated price on record. But in reality, was that a real transaction? So kind of like what you were just describing at Colony Ridge, when we went there outside of Houston, these two brothers had a whole foreclosure mill scam for the immigrants there, essentially because they couldn't speak English. And so they would sign, these contracts, then they'd be delinquent. They take the property, take the home, and then they'd sell it to somebody else. And I mean, it was a 44% foreclosure rate, but this was all private transactions. There are 40,000 people living in that new build site, Colony Ridge. It's massive. So this industry it's just gone on steroids, and no one has any idea, not even the people in it, how big it is.